Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show featuring Double B. We had Double D on. I'll tell you what, filling Clay Hall's shoes has been kind of tough, except I've gone for the extreme, the doubles, the double whammies. And had Double D, Dylan Davis on Friday. Double B, Bill Bender on. You know, Bill Bender's been on, off and on, almost since the Tim May Show started years ago in another affiliation in a galaxy far, far away. But Bill Bender, welcome back to the Tim May Show, my friend.
Hey, Tim, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, man. How are you?
I'm doing extremely well. Now that I've got my yard pretty much cleaned up from the debris of whatever that was, the straight line wind that went through on Tuesday and left limbs the size of trees laying all over my yard. Got those cleaned up, tidied up.
Tim, you've lived around here a long time in Central Ohio, and so have I. Have you ever seen a stretch like this?
Nope.
With the rain every single day, or the storm, or the wind, or the tornado siren. We've been fortunate here because, like, there's not been a lot of limbs down. But you drive across town. I drove across town last week, and as you know, I'm in Pickerington.
Yeah,
I mean, there's tree limbs everywhere. It has been. We need to get rid of it. Get rid of this weather.
It took 3 days for them to get my son and my daughter-in-law and grandkids. I have 3 grandkids by them in Upper Arlington. It took them 3 days to get their power back on. But I kept reminding people, man, when you have trees go down on power lines,
right,
you don't just go in there and flip the switch back on. I mean, and of course, Upper Arlington, as people know who grew up here, around here, I even lived there for 3 years of my life. There's trees everywhere, and many of them are the big mature kind that when they come down, they wipe out half a city block, it seems like. So that's what they were dealing with. Mine, I've got my house was built in 1971. My wife and I moved into it in 1985, but it's 4.5 acres, and we've got a little over 2 acres of pasture, but we've got, I think, 32 trees on our property, and many were like maple trees built in and around near our house. And so they're like 60 years old, so right. They're humongous. They weren't when we first moved in here, but and I had another tree that lost some stuff, a willow tree, but yeah, it's crazy, Bill, because we had straight line winds like that one time, a long time ago when I only had 2 kids. And that was about as scary as it's ever gotten out where I live. But the other day, that was pretty damn scary when you see pine trees bent half over. Luckily, they didn't snap, but a couple of maple trees did, and along with a willow tree. But the people who want to act like global warming is not upon us, that's fine. I've always said they named it wrong as global moistening, because anybody who's been outside in the last 2 weeks knows you step right outside into a steam bath, not a sauna, but a steam bath. And that's what's really made it icky, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like college football weather. You need that little breeze, the cold weather. Especially on a day, like today, where they do drop the AP poll, and now we have all the preseason polls out there and everything, so that people can say it's wrong later. But I would rather it have just been straight up hot. Feel that August. I know high school football.
Yes.
Got games this Friday in Ohio. That makes me feel good. But if we're still sitting in this rainy, wet muck, and like you said, by Friday, hopefully we can get this the heck out of here, and we can start getting some football weather in there.
The next 7 days, I think 5 of them on the forecast that just shows little icons. You have that little cloud with a lightning bolt in the middle of it.
Oh my gosh!
So, and even today, man, it's rained like 4 times torrentially. Right. At my house in between sunshine breaks. I mean, it's been crazy. But hey, let's get to the AP poll. Obviously, Ohio State was named the number 1 team in the college football, in the coaches college football poll. They were named the number 1 team by acclamation. And I think it's pretty close to that in the AP poll. I mean, what was your take on the AP poll that just got released today, with Ohio State number 1, Oregon number 2, Georgia number 3, Notre Dame number 4, Texas number 5. And I'll just go ahead and say the next 2, Indiana and Miami, the 2 teams who played for the national championship. what was that, 7 months ago, or 6 and 7 in this preseason poll. Just what's your initial takeaway, Bill Bender of the Sporting News?
Well, I mean, Ohio State's a safe pick. There's no way around that. You have 7 teams across the coaches pool and the AP pool that got at least one first place vote. And they are the 7 teams that I think are the most capable of winning the national championship. Ohio State, when you look at both polls, 78 first place votes, followed by Indiana, who I think is still ranked a little. I would have Indiana, Ohio State 1 and 2 in any order. I really would. I think Indiana, returning national champion, a lot coming back. I know Josh Hoover's a new quarterback, but if he is who I think he'll be and cuts down the turnovers, they'll be right there. I think those are the 2 best teams in the country. And then Oregon, I don't have a problem with Oregon at number 2. I mean, I think they're in that class with Texas, Georgia, Notre Dame, Miami, where if you look at the rest of the combined first place votes, Oregon 20 across coaches and AP, Notre Dame 11, Georgia 7, Texas 2, Miami 1. So I guess the stat that could jump out there, 120 voters across the coaches and the AP pool voted for a Big Ten team number 1, whether it was Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon. Yep. 9 voted for an ACC or an SEC team, Georgia 7, Texas 2. So I mean, the Big Ten's on top, and it has 3 legitimate national championship powerhouses at work, with the pressure, I think, a little bit on Oregon to be that team to crack and get their first one.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny. After you get past those 3, the first Big Ten team mentioned after that is at number 14, Southern California, USC. I've been saying this for several months now. I think USC has a chance to be really good this year, maybe upset the apple cart, like you and I were talking about the last time you were on. They're going to host Ohio State and Oregon. They win one of those 2 games, and they win a couple of road games they've got on their schedule, the least of which will be, I think, going to Happy Valley, Penn State. Wow, they could be in the mix for a college football playoff berth. But I think the poll voters are even coming around to that a little bit. But, of course, at 14, you're not in the top 12. But, I mean, it is interesting. Lincoln Riley is finally growing on some people in terms of what he's putting together there at USC.
Well, I think it's not just the offense with Jaden Mayava, the 2 running backs. They've got a new defensive coordinator in Gary Patterson. They kick off that run of Big Ten teams. That's like block 2 of Big Ten teams. You had USC tied at 15, Michigan 16, Washington 17, Penn State 18. I look at all 4 of them as, I would classify them as can make playoff. Don't think they could win a national title, but any one of those schools could make the playoff. Penn State, based on their schedule. USC, of the 4, I would be most likely to pick them, even though they've got to play all the big boys. They've got to play Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State. Michigan's got to play Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, with Oklahoma and Iowa coming into their house too. And then, you get into Washington as a kind of a de facto sleeper, but that's and then Iowa rounds it out. That's 8 teams from the Big Ten, 8 really good teams. And you know what? Sporting News had Illinois ranked. I think Illinois will be 3-0 when they come to Ohio State. I think, obviously they lost some talent with Luke Altmaier at the top, but that's half the Big Ten, Tim. Yeah, half the Big Ten I consider playoff caliber, and it's a really loaded conference. This is as good as it's ever been.
Yeah, but it is this kind of caliber. Yeah, but it is funny, though, that you look at the top 7, which we've already named, and then the next 4 are SEC schools, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, and LSU at number 11. And then you've got Texas Tech, and then you've got Alabama, and then BYU at 14, tied with USC in this poll. And then after after Penn State at 18, then you've got SMU, Tennessee, Utah without Cal Whittingham, Utah, like you said, Iowa, Houston, Louisville, and Missouri. So the Big Ten and the SEC are quite well represented with a smattering of others, right? Let's see, if the Big Ten and the SEC are the top 2, then the AY2, all you AYO2, all you other 2s would be the ACC and the Big 12, right? And then of course independent Notre Dame, that pretty much cuts it, right?
Well, I mean, there's no G6 schools ranked, right? You have to travel all the way down to You get to number 12, you get Texas Tech and BYU and Utah 12, 14, 21, Houston 23. That's that top tier of the Big 12.
Yeah.
I like all four of them as ranked teams for sure, and I'm not sure which one to pick to win the conference. I mean, according to our playoff bracket, it's BYU, which to me, again, the safe of the four, although I really like that Houston team under Willie Fritz. And then you get into the ACC and what they have. Miami, of course, at the top of that. And you got to get all the way down to SMU, 19, and then you get Louisville at 24. I think that's it, right? They don't have another team in there. And Clemson, first team out, so Clemson has 112 votes. My take on that is it's Miami really, it's their established power. That's good news for Jim Phillips in the ACC. The next thing is they need to win a national championship, which they've done with Clemson a couple times in the playoff era. If I had to rank the conferences in terms of who faces the most pressure, and I've actually done this morning, I think the SEC faces the most to at least get to the title game. I think the ACC is next because they have all that realignment rumor constantly surrounding their powers. They need somebody to break through. And Miami really helped with that last year. And then I would get into the Big 12. I don't know how much pressure they have. I just don't. I don't have the confidence that any one of those four Big 12 teams mentioned can win a national championship this season.
Yeah, what you're saying without saying it is they're in that club of the Big Four, whatever you want to call them, but they're sitting in the last chair of the Big Four. If you look at it from that vantage point of who's gotten there and actually made a strong surge challenge for the national championship, it's been a long time. So I'm just that's the curious conference. But those some of those teams could play in other conferences of the Big Four and pull upsets. That's for damn sure. And I think that's the team that has the most to prove, maybe, or the conference has the most to prove in terms of what are you doing amongst this group, right? And because if you look at it, much of the Big 12 is castaways, from the Southwest Conference way back when, from else places, or people who want to be good, want to be up there. I mean, people forget Houston was in the Southwest Conference way back when. That's one of the reasons I think Texas wanted to get out of the Southwest Conference a long time ago, with because they didn't, I don't think, like rubbing shoulders with Houston as a peer, because Houston was a late grab. So yeah, and I think you agree. Maybe you don't agree. I don't think we've seen the end of conference shakeups in terms of membership before, or if anything ever comes out of Washington, D.C. in terms of controlling college football. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think, you look at it and it's the realignment rumors will never stop. It's just a matter of who would target who. In the Big 12, for example, or the Big 10. Well, let's start with the Big 12.
Yeah.
Can the Big 12 or the ACC add more? Do they start to, does the Big 12 raid the ACC, and take a couple schools? And that would happen only if the Big 10 or the SEC grabbed one of those powerhouses. And I think if you're looking at an additive standpoint from the ACC, who do we always talk about? Florida State and Clemson. Where would Florida State go? If I were the Big 10, I'd try it. Now, that would be one. If I were the Big 10, I might try Florida State, Miami, if I ever expanded. Two more awesome markets. You go to another quarter. I know.
Not me, but that's you. Yeah.
I'm saying, or one of Florida State and Miami, and get Notre Dame and get it over with, and get Notre Dame, go to 20 that way. If I'm the SEC, if I ever look to add, and I don't think they are, I don't think the attitude, the appetite for Greg Sankey to add is there. Otherwise, they would have matched the Big 10 at 18 by now. But they could look at a North Carolina, Clemson, Miami, Florida State. Those are the four worth adding. If you're going to add from the ACC, and of course the Notre Dame question that prevails. And I don't, Tim, it's a long way of saying I don't think we're quite there yet. Maybe, when some of these grant of rights and TV deals expire, then we get to that point. But I don't think we're there right now.
Yeah, I've been saying for a couple of years now. I think if the Big 10 gets to 20 teams, which they better do before there's a cap on 19. The Big 10 gets to 20 teams, if there is a cap on 19, it would be North Carolina and Notre Dame. Those, to me, are the best fits of those available in terms. I'm not just talking about football or basketball, just fit-wise. They fit what the Big Ten perceives itself to be. And then past that, the Big 12 to me would be enhanced, in my opinion, if it could get Cal and Stanford to rethink their thoughts about being in the Atlantic Coast Conference, which makes no sense.
No.
And then also adding Washington State. I think Washington State, anyway, but also adding Washington State instead of this rebirth of the Pac-12, I think that would make the most sense in terms of re-enhancing its stature. Like I said, it still has a way to go in that regard, but this season could be interesting along those lines. Who's not in the top 25, Bill, in the AP poll, which you think is an oversight, and who's in it that you think, what are they doing there?
Well, I like Louisville at 24. We actually have Louisville a little bit higher. Missouri, we'll see. There would be the easiest one to take out. And if you were going to put somebody in out of who's left out, you could throw Clemson in there. Everybody else I'm looking at on that list, I'm not sure. Like I said, we have Illinois ranked, but it's very low. TCU could be an interesting team with Sonny Dykes. One of those Big 12 teams we might not see coming, especially if the quarterback works out for them.
Yep.
And that happened a couple years ago. So, but in general, I know fans love to bash the pools this time of year. It's like a tradition. I personally can't stand it when people say the pools don't matter, because it gives us something to talk about. One of the special things about college football is it has a number next to the name, and we can say that they were overrated at the end of the year or underrated or just properly rated. But I think in general this pool looks about right. It's about what we have at Sporting News. We have, I think, Illinois in and Missouri off. So we're not that far off what the voters think, and I'm okay with that. Yeah,
it's just really interesting because Texas Tech, I think, is a mystery to everybody based on quarterback play. Are they going to get quality quarterback play? I think they will. I can't remember the kid's name, who's now the guy now that Brendan Sorsby, was made to step away. But I think that's an interesting team because I think their defense is going to be really good, just like it was last year. I thought there was not enough made about how good their defense was, and of course they fell flat in the playoff. But I think that's a team that you could make an argument for being in the top 10 instead of sitting there number 12 in the first poll. I think LSU to me is the mystery of the SEC, and I mean that in a good way, because if they do knock off number 9 Ole Miss, second, third week of the season, they could be on their way. And they open with your team, Clemson, right? I'm trying to remember.
They do. Yeah. I was going to ask you, so if I told you, okay, those top 7 teams I think can win the national title, but I did this with 97-1 this morning, same exercise. I do. And then what's the fewest number of teams you would take that could possibly win the national title? I said, I think it's 8. And if you gave me one, so you're saying if I give you these teams, Tim, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, LSU, Alabama, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, and you had to pick one wild card that said, okay, I could see that team maybe winning the national championship. Is your answer LSU?
No, I think my answer I grew up an Alabama fan. I don't preach Alabama anymore in terms of whatever, but I remember having Phil Steele on this show a couple of weeks ago, and he made the point that he thinks Alabama could be the real sleeper in the SEC. It's hard to picture Alabama sleeping, right? Right. A big red elephant sleeping. Excuse me, crimson elephant. But I think they'll be as good at quarterback as they were last year. And I know what Ty Simpson did in his debut the other night for the Rams. But my point is, I think they're going to be better. Could be as good at quarterback. They can't be any worse than they were on the offensive line last year. I get the impression they're going to be pretty good. I think they're going to be good on defense. Their running game is going to be better because their offensive line is going to be better. I think Alabama could be a sleeper in terms of those teams you just pointed out, because obviously they went to Oklahoma Now, this is last year's teams. You don't judge much off of last year's teams, especially a lot of these teams have changed just personnel-wise. But they went to Oklahoma and did beat Oklahoma before Indiana squashed them. Squashed the right word I used there? Mashed them.
Well, no, you're not making for great podcast fodder
Kalen
here.
Kalen DeBoer wins. You know, I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, we're not making good fodder here because I that's who I would pick. Alabama with the quarterbacks if they get the right quarterback.
Yeah.
If they can run the ball, that's the big question. They have to be able to run the ball. They couldn't do that last year.
They weren't very good.
Alabama's identity is running the football. I think they have the athletes. I think they have the coaching. I think they have the better schedule. And I think some of that, Kalen DeBoer has to win right now. I don't want to say it's ever going to fade because he's always going to be that guy that followed Nick Saban. But maybe some of the Alabama fans, and especially the Alabama higher-ups, have figured out that those days are over. Yeah. So, it was probably a wake-up call watching them getting run over by Indiana. But I agree with Phil. I agree with you. And I think on some level, Alabama is being penalized for what happened in the Rose Bowl, which the Rose Bowl's over. Like that game result is over. There's nothing they can do about that except wear it. But that's over when they take the field this year. So if I'm still debating. I think it's Alabama, and I don't want to rule out Ole Miss because I like Trinidad Chambliss a lot. I do. He's our top-ranked quarterback, and I mean he showed last year when he gets on a heater, they can win. So maybe they're that team, that could be in the mix as well.
Yeah, I am with you. That was going to be my next pick, and in terms of 1A and 1B, I don't know if you agree or not. There just seems to be, even though Texas A&M is a credible program with a big-time credible coach, just like last year, there was just something missing from that team, and it finally caught up with them when they played Miami, obviously in the college football playoff. But it caught up with them a couple times last year. But what is your take on Texas A&M? I mean, I wouldn't label them a sleeper. I would label them more a team that hit the snooze button a few times last year, and will they keep doing that?
Well, I think what Mike Elko has been able to accomplish in a short period of time is change the culture of the program. He's one of those no-nonsense coaches that I like a lot. Just go out, coach football. Has had a little trouble with Texas the last 2 years, but they had a really good season. They have a nice quarterback, Marcel Reed. I like their receivers. In terms of what's missing, it's probably just the sheer volume of 4- and 5-star talent. I say that, but they had a bunch of guys drafted last year. Cassius Howell hit it off right away, the Bowling Green transfer edge rusher. So maybe it's not that. I just think it's a little bit, they got to take the next step with the players they have. And they're in the mix, though. I think they are going to be a factor. They've got to get past the Texas hurdle, obviously, and they're still, battling with all these teams. And that's, like I said, that run of teams that we were just talking about in the SEC, it's all of like, yeah, I really like, but I'm not completely sure. We talked about all of them except Oklahoma, which same deal. John Mateer early in the season last year, they looked like one of those teams. He gets hurt. It changed a little bit. And, we're going to find out all we need to find out. Well, not everything, but a lot about the Oklahoma Sooners when they go to the Big House and play Michigan in week 2. If they wear out Michigan like they did last year, I would expect some of the headlines to be a lot the same.
Yeah. Hey, last thing before we move on, I want to move on to another poll, which I found extremely interesting. It came out last week in the sporting news, but I'll get to that in a second. Keep everybody in mystery. What has to happen? What has to happen for Notre Dame, besides win, for Notre Dame to win the national championship? And is Notre Dame riding the wave of the indignation it felt a year ago? Remember, you can't spell indignation without the ND. Well, the indignation it felt by not getting invited to the college football playoff, despite the fact that pretty much the two best teams they played, they lost to last year. And they hardly play anybody this year. What does it take, you think, for Notre Dame to be sitting there the third week of January playing for the national championship? More of this. Do you think Notre Dame has the wherewithal to get to the national championship game?
I do. I thought they were ahead of schedule 2 years ago, And I do think that team, and I know they lost the first 2 games, had they gotten the playoff, they would have been very interesting the way that they were playing at the end of the last year with the running backs that they had and CJ Carr's development. And I like I said, when they played Ohio State a couple years ago, I didn't really believe that they could win that game. I thought Ohio State had more talent. Those Ohio State Notre Dame matchups tend to hinge on that. I mean, every one in my lifetime, that's what's happened. Ohio State's just had a little bit more. Would be interesting to see if that's changed this year because Notre Dame does have the quarterback. Notre Dame has an awesome back end defense with Leonard Moore and Bronte Johnson, a couple preseason All-Americans. How do they ride, like you say, the snub with Marcus Freeman? And how does that factor into the season? They do have some fun games, right off the go with Wisconsin. They play Miami on November 7th, the same time Ohio State. I'm not sure what the times are, but Ohio State plays Oregon. It's going to be a really fun college football day. They play SMU. And it's like you said, it's not an overwhelming schedule by any means. They do get North Carolina and Bill Belichick. And by the way, that might be the one game where after that one, Bill Belichick might be looking for a new job or retiring because I think they're going to get hammered in Chapel Hill. So, all of those things are at work. It's a really good Notre Dame team. I do think they're capable of getting to the national title. I think they could win it. And again, they fit in that description of the 3 Big Ten teams, Texas, Georgia, Miami, and Notre Dame. I can picture any one of those 7 teams holding up the trophy in Allegiant Stadium. Maybe the least Miami. I still think I have more questions about them. But the other 6, really the other 5, I still have questions about Texas, even though I love the roster. But Georgia, Notre Dame, Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, that's pretty easy to me.
Yeah, you kind of froze on me there for a second. Are you back?
I am.
Yeah, I'm with you. Hey, speaking of polls, man, I took part in this poll several weeks ago, voted on the top 20 teams of all time. I was doing it for my good friend, Double Down with Double B, Bill Bender of the Sporting News. That story came out last week, Bill, and was very interesting in my book because, it's funny. I think I saw every team on the list, I think, play in terms of television or whatever. And of course, I'm a big fan of going back and watching snippets of old time games, etc. But as I'm breezing through it again, I want to make sure that comment I just made is true. But number one, what was the funnest part about putting together that list? Because obviously, you talk about a poll vote, and how much does it mean? Obviously, you had a bunch of old time guys voting in this thing, but I don't know what was the funnest part about putting that together?
Compiling the ballots, whether it was yours or Steve Richardson, Ivan Maisel, Dennis Dodd, some legendary sports writers we're talking about here, yourself included, and the Sporting News staff, just seeing how the ballots kind of panned out and looking at it at the end and the finished product. And you'd think, if we had 20 people, all Tim Brando, another one, all opinions I respect, all people I wanted to be in the poll, and various age ranges. We had some younger guys. We had Trey Wallace and I are in the same neighborhood age-wise. And, it was fun. It was a fun exercise. I think the only team, maybe you didn't, I'm hoping, I don't think you saw Army 1944 live, I'm guessing. And maybe they're the one on there that I think you definitely didn't see live.
Well, but, Oklahoma 1956 didn't see, but I heard all about them.
Yeah, you probably. Yeah, I still hear about those teams. So compiling the list, putting it in order, kind of had a clue once you got like 10 ballots in. You're like, okay, Nebraska 95 or Miami 01 is going to be number 1 or number 2, and they kind of, that's an eternal question between those two programs, but. I pointed out 73 different schools received a vote, 73 different teams, I should say. 7, I believe 6 or 7 from Ohio State, several from Alabama, Notre Dame, and, out comes the 20 list. And I was really happy. The reception of it was really good. People are going to push back all the time. If it's missing something, I think it's missing a Florida State team, whether it was 99 or 2013. Surprised they're not on there.
Yeah, the 99 team, undefeated. I got to cover that game because Ohio State didn't play in a bowl game that year because they went 6-6, and I got to cover that Florida State, Virginia Tech game. Michael Vick on one side, Peter Warwick on the other side, and all that incredibly talented Florida State team. And was that Bowden's only undefeated team? I'm trying to remember.
It was because the story was that
Go ahead.
he had a picture frame that he was waiting to put the undefeated team in, and he did that. It's funny you say that, Tim, though. I feel like that game is equal parts. We remember Florida State and Warwick wire to wire. I remember watching Michael Vick run all over the place and make that a game. So
dude, he threw a rainbow. Yeah. It looked like that commercial he made later where he just threw the ball out of the stadium, remember? For whatever, when he got to the NFL. He threw a pass like that to that. I'm trying to remember the kid who caught it because he was probably the fastest guy on the field, even though you had Florida State running around out there. But that was a crazy game because it was literally they were throwing haymakers at each other. And Florida State had a few more haymakers. I mean, that's really what it added up to.
Yeah, it was a fun game. And again, you had 3 Miami teams on this list, 3 Alabama teams on this list. Obviously the 2 Nebraska teams. It was hard picking an Alabama team, but I was a little surprised that we did it. 3 Miami teams, 87, 91, and 01. All great teams, obviously. Yeah. Every team on here was a great team. It's just the ones that you leave off. Now, had I ran the headline and said, okay, send me 25, you look at that, and then the other 5 teams that would have got on would have been Notre Dame 47, Florida 2008, Florida State 99. We're just talking about them. A couple surprises. Alabama 61, not a surprise. That was a really good Bear Bryant team. And one of those teams that did get some buzz, Washington in 1991. That was a nice team that didn't make the list. So, again,
every one of those was on my ballot. That's pretty funny.
Well, there you go. Maybe you should have. We should have just stopped at your ballot. But no, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was very rewarding. A lot of people looked at it. We got a lot of shares off of it, and I personally, there's a lot of reward when you put together something like that with the voices around it.
One Ohio State team out of 20. Actually, one Ohio State team out of 25, right? One Ohio State team though out of your top 20. 1968. You know what? I think the first team I put on my ballot from Ohio State, and I had the 68 team on there too, I believe, but was the 1973 team. Because, oh my goodness, dude, I think that was the 10-10 tie team. And talking about Michigan, and then they got the vote from the Big Ten conference to Ohio State. The tiebreaker was a vote from the Big Ten athletic directors or whatever who voted Ohio State to go to the Rose Bowl, which hastened the change of the Big Ten letting other teams go to bowl games, which I think the next year or the year after is when Ohio State went to the Rose Bowl, and Michigan, I think, went to the Sugar Bowl, if I'm not mistaken, maybe played Auburn. But the bottom line is that was as talented a team. All of these teams, almost every one of them had cutthroat defenses on this group. I mean, that you put together. But that 73 team, I looked at a couple. I mean, Bear Bryant said his best team overall. That's one of what Bear Bryant said was 1966 when they went undefeated. They had won the previous 2 national championships during the poll days. They had in 64 and 65. And in 66, of course, that was the year of the tie between Notre Dame and Michigan State. And Alabama finished either second or third in the major polls. So, but Bear Bryant said it was his best team ever. Ken Stabler to Ray Perkins and little young Dennis Holman. But I digress. Bottom line is, well, when you start picking these teams, you find so many reasons to include them on. But it is amazing how everybody still thinks that Nebraska team in 95, who could have played with that team, right? I mean, that was not a slam dunk. I mean, they had the same first place votes as Miami of 2001, but people remember when you dominate, right?
Well, a couple things. One, with Ohio State, you had 7 different teams receive at least 1 vote. Yeah. 7 different Ohio State teams got at least 1 vote. The 2002 team and 2014 teams had over 20 votes, and they were in the neighborhood of being in that top 25. And then you talk about that Nebraska 95 team and how they've endured for 31 years. You get the pushback. Well, they'll say, well, Miami 01 would have beat them because they had all these NFL guys. And my pushback to that was, well, the year before, Nebraska 94 went undefeated with a lot of those players. Yeah. And they ran all over Ray Lewis and Warren Sapp.
Yeah.
Miami defense that featured Ray Lewis and Warren Sapp, who were 2 very good NFL players. Probably, arguably, other than Ed Reed, who was on the 01 team, the two best players to come out of that school in a lot of ways on defense. So yeah, I just, they ran all over people. They had a withering pass rush. It's a different era. And you could say, well, teams today could stop Tommy Frazier. And I'm like, are you sure? Yeah. When you have Lawrence Phillips and Amon Green and the backfield and the offensive line that they had, good luck. So I think they were a fine choice. It's funny. And Bobby Carpenter and I were talking about this on his pod last week. Two Ohio State teams, 94-95, or 94-95. You wonder about how would 95 Ohio State fared against that Nebraska team in a playoff. Been interesting. And then in 94. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say Eddie George won the Heisman, and Tommy Frazier finished second or third in the voting. You know what I mean? So, I mean,
it would have been a game.
Were there.
It would have been fun. And then
it would have been a hell of a game.
94, Penn State, Nebraska would have been a really fun game. That Penn State 12-0 team. And that's how, in this playoff era, we can't have those debates because we do play it out. There's no, what about this team in 91? Or what about the Washington and Miami are both in the top 25. They both claim national titles. So, one thing I wanted to mention and kick it to you real quick was the 70s teams were really fun to rank. It was cool to see how they went out. And because we weren't in a playoff era, you had Ohio State, USC, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Alabama, Notre Dame. I might have left somebody out. All of those teams were like dynasties at the same time.
Michigan.
Well, Michigan, but I think, but Michigan didn't win a national title in the 70s.
True.
But I'm saying all of these schools are winning national titles. How fun was it to watch that when you had this era of just so many superpowers splitting up these national titles?
That's where the blue bloods, that's where the transfusion came for blue bloods. I do believe, because that's still etched in a lot of people's minds. I'm 72 years old, so I can remember watching football back in 1960, and 61, definitely Alabama in 61. But the point is, almost everybody back then dotted the I, pardon the expression, or had a big time running game and a big time defense, and a few teams actually threw the ball, but it was still just slam bam, physical football being played at a very high clip. And I think that's what stood out most of all. Plus, college football games only lasted 2 hours and 30 or 45 minutes, back then too, because only one or two games were on television. So it was, what an interesting time it was. I've thought about that many times, about how reputations, especially among the big time coaches, were made then, because, they were flying the banners over Ohio Stadium in 1967 to get rid of Woody Hayes. In 69, 70, Alabama was looking at maybe making a move against Bear Bryant. Well, Woody Hayes and Bear Bryant had their best, deepest teams in the 1970s. Just think if somebody had swung the axe like they swing it readily now, how things would have changed back then. So it was a cool thing. Hey, I know you got to go, Bill. I appreciate you coming on with me to talk about two of the coolest polls going on right now, the AP poll of current teams and the Sporting News poll of teams of the bygone era. I want to ask you one last thing. Of all those teams that were on those top 20 historically, what was your favorite?
I mentioned that 95 Nebraska team. That was it was really, out of the teams in the top 20. Notre Dame 88 was pretty cool. Like, if you really go back and look at it, that them being their last national championship team, the way that they won it with the close games, I still, being a Catholic school kid, you remember the Catholics versus convicts games very vividly. They were a fun team. Now, I wasn't around for it, but I'd be remiss not to mention that, the Ohio State 68 team gets talked a lot about in my hometown because of Rex Kern, quarterback from the west side of Lancaster. He wasn't in my dad's class in high school, but they were a couple up, a couple down. And, Rex Kern, I had a chance to talk to him years ago. And, I always tell the story. I'm interviewing Rex Kern, my editors from Alabama, and we were going on for a while, but we were talking about Lancaster. We weren't talking about Ohio State. And my boss was like, "What in the world were you talking about with him?" And I was like, "No, he's a Lancaster guy." And it was pretty cool to, I know I can't say they're my favorite because I didn't actually see him play.
They're really good.
One last thing I would say is, it is interesting, and maybe it's a hint of recency bias, that Indiana was the highest ranked Big Ten team on the list. Because I've seen some really good Big Ten teams in my lifetime. We mentioned the Ohio State teams. That 97 Michigan team was very good. The Ohio State teams in 14, 24, 15. I could go on. Our poll decided that Indiana 2025 was the highest ranked Big Ten national champion on the list.
Well, real quick before you go, no one's ever done what Kurt Cignetti has done in the these past 2 seasons, is turned the losingest program in history around to undefeated as a national champion, 16-0. I told you real quick, I voted for that 2014 Ohio State team because it won the first extended college football playoff of 4 teams. And then 2 years ago, Ohio State won the first 12-team playoff. And I've told people on radio shows down in Alabama, I respect both Bear Bryant and Nick Saban and what they meant to that program in that state. But what Nick Saban did was he won most of his national championships in a playoff era, and or at least in a 1 versus 2 era, the BCS and in the playoffs. So I give his national championships a little bit more credence than I do the 61, Alabama team, the 66 Alabama team, only because they had to beat either the number 1 or 2 team in the country to win it, or they had to beat 1 or 2 other teams to win it. And so that's kind of the way I look at it. Like you said, you can't compare eras. I mean, the 44 Army was a hell of a team, but you know what? Half of Ohio State's team was fighting World War II, while Army, ironically, wasn't. They had some of the best players in the country because they were Army. So it was pretty weird time when you think about it.
Fair. And then one other team I wanted to mention real fast. You talked about fun to watch in person. The 19 LSU team. We're going to look back on them, and there's a chance that Joe and Justin Jefferson, Joe Burrow, and Jamar Chase could all be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame someday. Yeah. I mean, they're working on it. There's still a lot to be done there. But they seen that championship game and the way they burned through Clemson. That was as good an offense as I've ever seen. So when you get down to the Final Four that we had, Nebraska, Miami, LSU, Texas 05, of course, with Vince Young that needed every second to beat Ohio State, but still an unbelievable team. That 4-team playoff would have been a lot of fun to see with the matchups, the players, the styles.
Amen. And by the way, I voted Vince Young for the Heisman that year. Obviously, he didn't win it. I don't care what he became as a pro. That guy put his team on his shoulders about 4 times in that season, including the USC game, to win it all, and just said, we're not going to lose. I mean, that was spectacular to watch. Bill Bender, thank you very much for joining me, my friend.
Hey, man, the fact that we're talking means we're going to do it a lot more this season. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much for having me on, Tim.
Me too, my friend. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm going to keep talking here a little bit more too, ladies and gentlemen, because Ryan Day had a press conference on Saturday after Ohio State's first, I think, deep scrimmage of the preseason. And probably, in my opinion, it wasn't overlooked, but probably the biggest news coming out of that was Luke Fahey, freshman quarterback, is pressing to be possibly the backup quarterback on this team, which is very interesting because we understand, everybody understands Tavien St. Clair is from Bellefontaine, and he's in his second year. And a lot of people thought he was really going to make a move in the spring and in this preseason. But it hasn't happened with the urgency that Ohio State, the coaches were hoping it would happen. That, number one. Number two, Luke Fahey's making plays. We got to watch him in some scrimmage type stuff on Saturday a week ago when the entire practice was open for both us and people who paid, the fans who paid to get in there. And what stood out to me was those all 3 practices, but especially in that one, how he was putting the ball on the money to open receivers, and people were kind of gushing about the receivers and kind of forgetting about who was throwing them the ball. But you could tell even then he'd already moved past Justin Martin into the transfer from Maryland, the older player in that room that they got just for insurance. He had moved past him into the third spot on the pecking order of the quarterbacks even then. And now when you hear Ryan Day, the head coach, talk about how he's pressing Tavien St. Clair perhaps for that backup spot, I don't think it's a ruse. I mean, yeah, you want Tavien St. Clair to really get feel the fire under his rear end and get going with things. But there were times in the spring where they weren't, the way I understood it, the coaches weren't quite pleased with some of the progress Tavien made. He's had moments of spectacular play and moments of looking lost, the way I understood it. And the consistency is what they're looking for from these quarterbacks, obviously from everybody on the team. But now when you hear that Luke Fahey, young man, 5'11", maybe stretch him a little bit, he'll be 6 feet tall. But the guy who can run, but also throw the ball with great accuracy. It's really funny now that he's pressing to possibly be the backup to Julian Sayin. And then you figure out he's from Mission Viejo, California, which is only 40 miles from where Julian Sayin's from in Carlsbad. I mean, they're right down the coast from each other there, north of San Diego. Wow. The connection is very interesting to me in that regard. And I don't know if guys that come out of there have a little bit more of a feel for how to read defenses, maybe just how to play the game a little bit. But with Ryan Day throwing that on the reporters, I happened to not be there for the press conference because I was co-hosting a radio show on 97.1 The Fan here in Columbus. But, of course, I immediately seized on that and got the update from Dylan Davis, my double down with Dylan Davis, who's going to be on this show once a week as the season progresses. But the bottom line is that's big news. Also big news in the sense of offense that Bo Jackson felt a little bit of heat as preseason started. Looked to us as we were watching that he was basically number 2 in the pecking order behind Isaiah West, a bigger, stronger looking Isaiah West than the last time you saw him. But it looks like Bo Jackson felt that fire and got going. So I'm very curious to see how that's going to play. And here's the thing, whether they start either one, I'm not sure one is that much better than the other in terms of he needs to be the guy that carries the ball 90% of the time and the other guy 10%. And obviously Jacoby Jackson, the transfer from Florida, had his black stripe removed. He's a bona fide Buckeye. So there's a running back also to keep your eye on. And, of course, Legend Bay, as Ryan Day said, he's got a lot of catching up to do, but there's no doubt about what he can mean to this offense if, in fact, he does that catching up, the freshman. So offense looks like it's coming around in a big-time way. And then, of course, Devin McEwen, what he has brought immediately out of the gate since he showed up at Ohio State back in the winter and in preseason camp. We've talked about him. I think I've talked about him in every podcast I've done here the last 2.5 weeks. But, man, he catches the ball, then he makes something happen with it. So, you could see a starting lineup if there's 3 receivers running out there of Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Ennis, and Devin McEwen. That would be a damn good starting wide receiver group. And then you throw Legend Bay into that mix, for example, or Chris Henry Jr. or Brock Boyd, and you got something going for you. So this camp is still not in its infancy, but in its they just started walking. Let's put it that way. And it's going to be interesting to see how things play out on the offensive side of the ball. Not the least of which, of course, is on the offensive line, where Austin Saraville had to miss a couple of practice last week. I understand he got a head bump, but he's expected back this week. And I think Ryan Day would have been happy to have named this is the starting offensive line, but with Austin being out for a couple of 3 practices, they wanted to hold off on that. But I still say the offensive line could very much be Ian Moore at left tackle, Luke Montgomery at left guard, Carson Hinsman at center, Austin Cerville at right guard, and Philip Daniels at right tackle. Austin Cerville, Philip Daniels, Carson Hinsman, and Luke Montgomery, all of whom were starters last year. Ian Moore is the guy that they really want to see progress in this preseason camp, see him pick up where he left off at the end of spring. And I understand he's done very well, but that doesn't necessarily mean like Josh Padilla has really come on. He didn't get to take part in spring practice after he was recovering from a touch-up surgery. Josh Padilla, we understand, has come along very well. So what a curious time it is, because if they get that offensive line figured out, this is going to be, I'm telling you, it's going to be an offense to watch this fall, ladies and gentlemen. But really appreciate Bill Bender joining me. Really appreciate him letting me vote in that top 20 teams, not programs, but teams of all time. That was fun to do because you could make a case for about 80 being on that list, really. I mean, it was that. I mean, I could make a case for a couple of Ohio State teams that didn't even win a national championship. As you heard me talk to him about that 73 team, man, that was about as talented as it gets. If they had just started throwing the ball sooner in that game at Michigan, they would have won that game going away. But it ended up being a tie. The team still went to the Rose Bowl, won the Rose Bowl. But what a talented, ridiculous team with a cutthroat defense. But it is what it is at this point. That top 20 is in the Sporting News archives. And will this team, 20 years from now, will we be talking about this 2026 Ohio State team the way we talk about the 2014, the 2024, the 1968 team, the 2002 team? Well, that remains to be seen. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Tim May. Thank you for joining the Tim May Podcast. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to hit the like button. But until next time, I'll see you then.